Hello, I'm David R. Jones of the Community Service Society. Welcome to the Urban Agenda. I'm very pleased to be joined for today's program by New York Congressman Gregory Meeks, whose district includes the communities of Southeast Queens. Welcome, Congressman.
Good to be with you, David.
Well, I think we'd like to know your take on what's happening in Washington at this point. It seems that we have an administration, obviously, that doesn't seem to be concerned particularly about urban areas. Obviously, the Democrats are in the minority in both houses. What can we do in this kind of environment? What have you been doing now?
Well, there's a couple of things. Number one, when people ask me what's going on in Washington, I say nothing, and then again, a whole lot. We are bogged down in really the kind of debate that has nothing to do with helping people. In fact, if anything, I think that we are bogged down in debate that goes to the contrary. When you look at building and looking at urban America, where we should be making investments, there are no investments that are going there. And what we're really looking to do is a reverse Robin Hood syndrome, where we're taking away from the poor to give to the rich. These huge tax cuts that the president has implemented has a direct and devastating effect as to what we do and where government will move in the future. I'm not one who's a huge proponent. I don't believe that government is the be-all and the end-all. Mm-hmm. However, government has a huge role in making sure that our poor and our middle class are taken care of and at least get a fair shot. What's happening now, they're not getting a fair shot.
So how do we go about turning this around? I mean, clearly a lot of working people, not only working people in urban areas, are really getting hurt here. Do you have any sense of movements beginning here?
Yeah, I think that you're seeing a collective coming together, and I think that you'll see some of those effects in this coming election. We've got to remember that in the year 2000, for example, actually Al Gore won the election, number one, and when you look at the number of people that voted for Al Gore and the number of people that voted for Ralph Nader. We talk about Al Gore losing the election, or winning with just 500,000 people. But when you look at the Nader factor also, there was over 3 million people that did not vote for George Bush. And so you see that coming together. When you look at the state of what's taking place in Iraq and the billions of dollars that we're spending there, all of the money is coming from the taxpayers. We really don't have a coalition of the willing. It's the coalition of the billing, because those individuals that are with us or are part of this coalition, we are paying them to be with us, with the possible exception of Great Britain. And so you look at the No Child Left Behind Act, all the money was left behind. You look at how they're trying to end Section 8 and public housing. That spells doomsday if this administration was allowed to continue. And I think that the people, though, as I talk to people, and I've traveled, I'm working very hard with Senator Kerry, and I've traveled this nation, and in just sitting down and talking to everyday people, independents, not just Democrats, some Republicans, who tell me that they just don't like the direction this country's moving in, I think that there's going to begin to be some change. And what has also taken place, there have been certain key votes, certain votes that the Republicans have won, but it was not easy. Now, when you look at what took place with reference to the Medicare bill, that was a bill that passed, barely passed, but it was held open. The vote was held open the longest of any vote in the history of the United States of America, in trying to convince and twist arms of individuals on the Republican side by the president and by the Speaker and Tom DeLay to vote for a bill that they knew was bad for America.
And as a matter of fact, that bill now has come under extraordinary criticism as not serving the interests of seniors very well and being total confusion for everyone who's confronting it. And I assume that's going to have its consequence too. But tell me about your own district. What are the array of voters? What are your voters telling you in your district?
Well, my district, it's an international district. Right. It's got individuals from all parts of the world, and what they're looking at how it's in a phase. At one point we were in a phase where businesses and people wanted to go out to the suburbs, go out further to Long Island, et cetera, to shopping centers. Now they're coming and say, well, why can't we invest and have the kinds of businesses that within our community, so that we don't have to travel distances to go shopping, etc. So there's a movement about redeveloping and creating affordable homes and affordable housing within the district. And so my voters are telling me, let's get that done, as well as, I represent a district that is largely middle class.
Right.
Yet, when you look at the school districts and how they are performing, it's not what you would expect a middle class, or how you would expect a middle class community schools to be. And so there's a huge cry in regards to improving the school systems and reducing the overcrowdedness and getting new facilities. I hear that on a consistent basis from my constituents.
Well, it would be interesting to hear also, Community Service Society just came out with a report showing huge numbers of particularly black men, but other groups who were suffering unemployment. And they clearly cluster some in your districts, obviously some in other districts in the city of New York. What do you get the sense of people who are out of work? Do you hear from people who are out of work in your district? And what are they confronting? I assume 9/11 had some impact because of the airport in your district. What are you hearing on the street?
9/11, of course, had a huge impact, and the whole negative aspects of the airline industry,
Right.
With the possible exception of JetBlue, American Airlines laying off numbers of individuals, Delta Airlines laying off individuals, as well as the proposed constructions that they were doing on John F. Kennedy Airport, which would create jobs. Those were all severely cut back, and thereby people laid off. And then many of those that worked in the financial industry. New York's financial industry is a huge employer. So a lot of individuals who were laid off as the financial industry moved to Connecticut or moved to Jersey, and then began to cut back. And so we find, and then you have a huge cluster of individuals who really have never been involved in the job market. We've got a public housing sector within the community, and so you've got a large sector of individuals who basically are low-skilled individuals that have no place to go. There's no jobs that are available to them, and the problem, with it really is there's not even any training opportunities for them. So what we're trying to do in our district is to look at the great opportunity to build and the people and the businesses that are interested in moving into our district, and then create partnerships with institutions like York College, like the School of Aeronautics, to take advantage of some of the natural resources that we have, whether it be the environment and the beaches and Jamaica Bay, or the airport.
Now, this is something that we haven't heard from the mayor. Mayor Bloomberg has been talking about third grade, and there's been a whole controversy. We don't have to get into that. But the question is, what's happening to older adolescents, teenagers, as they approach the end of their high school career? What's happening in Queens? I know you brought a special program for the aeronautical industry in, but do you see a lot of support coming from the administration on this end of the spectrum? No,
we don't have any, basically what we've done, we have not had the kind of support that I think that we could and should have from the administration in that regard. What we have done thereby is seek private institutions and private support to get them to invest, particularly those businesses and companies that are making a profit within the community, and getting them to invest and begin to train. I look, for example, in the Rockaways, where there's huge space and there's not going to be anything but building and upliftment. But what we're trying to do is to look at what those future jobs will be. And oftentimes what happens is there's not the proper planning, in my estimation. Right. So you don't do anything until the people are there to build, and then you say you want somebody to be hired, and they say, well, we can't find anybody because no one has the skills. Well, what we're doing now, we're trying to look at how we want to develop this community, and to begin to train the individuals before the jobs are there, so that when they begin to have new businesses, etc., the excuse of not being able to find someone will not be there. We'll say, well, these people were trained specifically for this particular job. Here is a workforce for you.
I think it's a great model. Obviously, other cities have done this. I'm disturbed. I used to be youth service commissioner of the city of New York for some years. And I remember, I remember trying to get the people at VOC-Ed, at the then Board of Education, to focus on what was happening in the rest of the country, the very thing you're talking about. And I've never seen a bureaucracy this bad. And it would be clearly, this would be the time where you have business leadership in the Gracie Mansion. You have obviously employment problems to bring these kinds of models forward. So, you know.
And we've got to think out of the box. We've got to think creatively.
Right.
I know that the research you've done, 51% African-American males out of work. And if we don't think that that's going to come back to haunt and hurt the city, then we're badly mistaken. So we can't have the mentality of, well, that's them, and too bad, because it's going to affect every citizen of this city. We've got to collectively come up with a plan to think about how we're going to reduce and provide employment and education and training for those individuals who are now locked out of the job market.
It's interesting. I've said the same. You don't even have to like the people who are out of work. It's an incredible drain on city resources if you have that many people who are not being productive. On taxes, you know, whether they believe it or not, community policing cannot control but so much if people see no livelihood potentials for a long period of time. You know, the question of other sort of societal impacts. You can't get married, as the conservatives keep talking about marriage. It doesn't happen unless you have a job.
Absolutely.
And I think all of those things clearly have to be brought home. And I guess the question as you talk to your fellow congresspeople as you go across the country, what are they seeing in urban centers? What are they seeing in terms of the impacts? Is New York alone, or are we an isolated instance?
I think that if you look at every major metropolitan city in this nation, they're all suffering from the same ills that we're suffering from. You can go to Chicago, you can go to Detroit, you can go to Philadelphia, you can go to Los Angeles, and you see the same kind of impact. And you know, it's a drastic difference from what was, or at least what was trending 3.5 years ago, when we were beginning to focus on what we call our new markets, and new markets being inner city America,
right,
and certain parts of rural America, where there was direct tax incentives going to businesses to do business in those communities and to hire people from those communities. We've gone 180-degree different direction than we were 3.5 years ago. When we start talking about unemployment was being lowered, we start talking about, you know, more and more folks going back to school. That's all gone, and that's what we've got to get back to, and I think in a hurry. And that's what I think is at stake coming up in this November's election.
We'll be right back to continue the urban agenda.
Are your kids getting enough art? Whether through poetry, dance, music, or drama, the arts open the doors to creativity. As a mother and teacher, I know that arts education can help our children develop confidence and a better understanding of the world around them. Even if you have just 30 minutes a week, get your kids more involved in the arts and think about the kind of world we can leave behind for our children and our children's children.
Art. Ask for more. AmericansForTheArts.org.
Welcome back to the Urban Agenda. We're speaking with Queens Congressman Gregory Meeks. Let's talk a little bit now about housing in your district. I mean, we talked briefly about the issue of the federal problems with Section 8. There are obviously some turmoil around something called Mitchell-Lama. Many of the tenants there are threatened with possible hikes in their rent that might make it impossible. What are the people in your district confronting on the housing front?
Well, they're very concerned, particularly those Mitchell-Lama in public housing, because of some of the new trends that are taking place in Washington, D.C. Recently, you know, and we lost on a very close vote, for example, in public housing, where there's mandatory volunteering. And there's a whole group of people, you know, for example, you know, it may be that you have a family where the mother or the father works full-time, and one does not because they want to stay home with the kids to make sure that happens. Well, you're saying that that person can't do that, that they have to, you could have an individual who's older, you know.
Well, we helped one of the rallies on this, and I guess what gets me upset is not the notion of everyone should volunteer, but to select public housing people who are paying rent and not get people for their second home mortgage deduction. It's the inequity of it, you know. Let's have everyone volunteer.
Right. Absolutely right.
It's
and then you have the one strike and you're out provision.
I know.
Now, everybody wants safe, and I want to be clear on this, David, everybody wants to make sure that those who are the undesirable tenants, that they're out.
Well, this we should explain to our viewers. Basically, if someone in your household gets into trouble, the entire family can be evicted from public housing.
That is correct.
Right.
And we want to make sure that the bad person gets evicted,
Right.
but we can keep a family, not making them homeless. So this is what's confronting a number of my constituents,
Right.
and they are asking me to work with them to come up with some amendments and some legislation that can change it. Then, as you indicated, this whole issue with Section 8. The government is looking to begin to downsize and, in my opinion, possibly eliminate a lot of Section 8. And so individuals, there will not be any new vouchers. And so you have a problem right now with no new vouchers and the kinds of homelessness that we have right now and the problems we have with individuals of being able to find affordable homes, particularly here in New York City, where the housing market is extremely high.
Right.
And we are confronted with that. In fact, you know, we've had the members of the New York City Housing Authority come to Washington, D.C. and try to appeal to both Democrats and Republicans because, oddly enough, you know, when you think of public housing in New York, you think it's only a New York City problem and issue. When in fact, Syracuse and Buffalo and Rochester have some of the same concerns and problems that we have. And so we're trying to come together, and a lot of what is being planned in Washington is really anti-New York. And I just think that it's a shame, given that, you know, we talk about attention being shifted because of 9/11. Well, that is more reason to shift attention on New York and New York State because of the kind of spotlight that we're in and the possibility of victimization that can happen.
This raises another question, and I don't want to be partisan because we're nonpartisan. Has the mayor and the governor, this is a state issue that's affecting not only New York City, not only, have they been vocal exponents of doing something about housing supports in the state of New York?
No. That's the major problem. If you ask me, David, the major problem that I've had with the current mayor and governor is that, you know, given that the majority of the House is Republican, the president is Republican, and the majority of the Senate is Republican, they should be there and be the loudest and the biggest advocates for the state of New York. Yet you don't find that. They are, you know, seem to be very passive about it and go about it in a manner that does not show the kind of concern that I think our chief executive officer of both the state and the city should be showing with reference to getting its fair share of federal dollars.
It's interesting, not every Republican, I'm old enough now to remember Jake Javits and Rockefeller, they were down on critical state issues across the board. I just don't remember this kind of silence on critical issues in the same way.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge problem,
Right.
because some would say, well, the president is Republican, so it should be to an advantage politically to have a Republican mayor. When that is not true. We're being shortchanged all the way down the line.
Interesting. You have Mitchell Lama projects in your district.
Yes.
Are they being threatened by the expiration of some of the
Yeah, in fact, what
arrangements?
we had to do in a number of them, the tenants are so concerned, I had to bring in representatives from HUD to come in to talk to the tenants, to talk about what the future holds,
Yeah.
and how, you know, their rents will be, you know, brought up.
This for our viewers is a somewhat specific question. Mitchell Lamas are obviously projects that were subsidized by the government, but using private owners to deal with it. Basically, there was a 20-year life expectancy of the subsidy. When that's over, basically they're allowed to go to market rent. And what I didn't realize, and actually my staff brought to me, how many people of very modest means are in Mitchell Lama housing. I think the average income is about 40 to 50,000, which cannot sustain market rates.
That's correct. And it would have a devastating effect, because when you think about the number of Mitchell Lamas, and there are some in every borough in the city,
Right.
a devastating effect on families. Here was a way the Mitchell Lama helped individuals who were aspiring to get into the middle class, and thereby, you know, you construct your income so that you can pay reasonable amount for a place to live and still have something so that you can afford transportation to and from work, pay for, you know, some goods that you may need for your kids. All of that will be in jeopardy, and the state, I think, as a result, would be devastated because these individuals will be put out, and we already have a homeless problem.
Now, you've been a major supporter of Senator Kerry and his run. What do you see as how this campaign seems to be shaping up from the vantage point of the Democrats, and how do you see the voters responding as you go across the country?
Well, clearly, John Kerry, in my estimation, is far superior and a far superior leader than George Bush. I mean, this whole episode that we're going through right now with the prison scandal, and if you look at how the whole episode with the war was conducted and the president's fiscal and economic policies, there's just no leadership there. And I think that John Kerry, who is an individual who made sacrifices as a young man by going to war, then coming back and speaking the truth of what he thought about the war, which speaks to me of his honesty and wanting to correct and help a situation, as an individual who understands how to bring people together. We are more divided in Washington, D.C. The president talked about before he was elected, he was running, that he was going to bring Washington together. Washington is more divided now than it ever has been, and thereby it causes a logjam. And that's why initially I said we're doing nothing, because we don't talk to one another at all. It's at logjam. And so he is a uniter. John Kerry is a uniter, not a divider. And I think that the American people are beginning to feel, as I've traveled across this country with Senator Kerry, that we need to move in a different direction. If anybody has traveled anywhere outside of the United States of America and they see the disdain that we're currently being looked at, we had an opportunity because of 9/11 to bring the world, the globe closer together and to fight the war on terrorism. As a result of the actions and the lack of leadership that this president has provided, we are more divided worldwide, and people are looking at Americans in a way that they've never looked at us before, not as leaders or as world leaders, as bringing the world together, but as individuals or as a country that is arrogant and thinks only about ourselves.
Now, as you see your Republican counterparts in the Congress, what is their attitude? It may not be public. How do they feel about what's going on here?
Well, I think that you have some moderate Republicans who are feeling very uncomfortable. I think recently Congressman Jack Quinn from Buffalo, he's a Republican, he resigned. I think part of that resignation, it came out of the blue, is that he has been ostracized, and anybody that is a moderate within the Republican Party, you know, they've been ostracized and are not able to speak any of their views or have any additional thought in that whole conference. And so there's that kind of pressure. But, you know, they call Tom DeLay the hammer in Washington, D.C. on the Republican side, because anyone who does not agree with their extreme right-wing policies, he levels the hammer. And I'm not saying this is something that Democrats have said. This is something that my Republican colleagues have told me. And they said that basically when you go into their Republican conference, you know, and the only thing is missing is really the uniforms, the way they try to make you march down a particular dotted line.
There's a much more local concern, obviously. We've done and worked together on issues of voter registration in the city of New York. And one of the things we've noticed in the last drives that we've worked on is a real disaffection among young people, particularly young people of color, to the political process. How does this campaign, the Kerry campaign, it reaches obviously sometimes to college children, you know, students, to labor. How is it going to reach to disaffected potential voters who obviously not only in New York but elsewhere could make the difference? There are more than 1 million unregistered, most of them young people in the city of New York alone. You know
what happened? Those young people want someone that talks to them, that can show them that they're going to have a brighter and better future. What we've started in Washington, first in the Congress, along with Senator Kerry, we call it, you know, there's a group of young people, you know, I wish I could say I was one of them, but the 30 and under crowd, talking about how we can propose and put forward legislation that benefits them, talking about how we're going to give them a hand up, talking about how we're going to train them so that they have a better opportunity to live tomorrow. We've got to go straight to them and address them directly and issues that affect them.
My thanks to Congressman Meeks. I'm David R. Jones of the Community Service Society, and thank you for watching the Urban Agenda. To learn more about the work of the Community Service Society of New York or to comment on the Urban Agenda, please contact us at 212-614-5425 and on the web at www.cssny.org.